When Clara received the letter, she almost didn't open it. A faint tremor ran through her hand as she broke the wax seal. Her great-aunt, a woman she'd only known through hushed family stories, had finally passed away. The Blackthorn estate, a name spoken only in whispers, was now hers. But some inheritances are not gifts. They are burdens. Some inheritances shouldn't be accepted. The old Victorian mansion loomed under a sky bruised with storm clouds. Its windows, like vacant eyes, flickered with the faint, ghostly light of a single candle. As Clara's carriage pulled away, leaving her alone on the overgrown gravel path, she felt a profound sense of isolation, as if she had just stepped out of time itself. The house seemed to breathe, its ancient wooden bones groaning under the weight of the coming storm. The front door, heavy and carved with withered ivy, creaked open with a sound like a final, mournful sigh. The air that rushed out to greet her was thick and cloying, smelling of melted candle wax, damp earth, and decaying paper. It was the scent of a place forgotten by time, a place where memories had festered. As Clara stepped inside, the door swung shut behind her with a definitive, echoing slam. She was sealed, and she felt an immediate prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the undeniable feeling of being watched. Her footsteps echoed unnervingly on the marble floor of the grand foyer. Dust motes danced like tiny spirits in the slivers of moonlight that pierced the grime-caked windows. The walls were lined with portraits, a gallery of stern-faced ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to follow her every move. They were all there, the Blackthorns of generations past, each one captured in oil and shadow. But as she walked down the long, silent hallway, her gaze fell upon a single, conspicuously empty frame hanging between a grim-faced man and a pale, sorrowful woman. It was a void on the wall, a missing piece of the house's history, waiting to be filled. The hallways seemed to whisper her name, the soft, rustling sounds like secrets trying to escape the floral-patterned wallpaper. The house remembered her, even if she didn't remember Italiano. Drawn by an unseen force, Clara found herself ascending the narrow, spiraling staircase to the attic. The air grew colder with each step, the silence more profound, broken only by the sound of her own breathing and the faint, rhythmic dripping of water somewhere deep within the house's heart. The attic was a tomb of forgotten things, shrouded in cobwebs and years of accumulated dust. Furniture lay draped in white sheets, resembling a congregation of silent, hunched figures. In the center of the room, illuminated by a single beam of moonlight from a dormer window, was an object of a different shape. With trembling hands, she reached out and pulled back the tattered, yellowed sheet. And there it was, a portrait. It was a life-sized painting of a young woman, her face so exquisitely rendered it felt alive. But what made Clara's breath catch in her throat was that the face was her own. It was a perfect mirror image. The same scattering of freckles across the bridge of her nose, the same slight curl in her auburn hair, the same deep green hue of her eyes. It was impossibly, terrifyingly her. Her fingers traced the bottom of the canvas, where a small, elegant signature was scrawled in faded gold paint. It read, Eleanor Blackthorn, 1904. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pierced through her.
Who was Eleanor?
And why did she have Clara's face? That night, sleep offered no escape. Clara dreamt she was back in the attic, standing before the painting. The air was frigid, and the only sound was the frantic ticking of a clock that wasn't there. In the dream, the woman in the portrait Eleanor slowly, deliberately, smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was knowing, triumphant. Clara woke with a gasp, drenched in a cold sweat. The image burned into her mind. Driven by a terrible compulsion, she lit a candle and hurried back up to the attic. The wind howled outside, rattling the window frame. She held the candle aloft, her hands shaking. There, on the canvas, was the smile from her dream. It was painted perfectly onto the woman's lips, a subtle, permanent change. The painting was no longer just a reflection. It was watching, and it was changing. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. The house became a prison of subtle terrors. The clock in the hall ticked erratically, sometimes slowing to a crawl, other times racing ahead. Distant whispers seemed to follow her from room to room, always just at the edge of hearing. At night, she heard a soft, dry scratching sound coming from the attic, like fingernails on canvas. Each morning, she would return to the portrait, a moth drawn to a sinister flame, and each morning, she found a new change. The woman in the painting, Eleanor, was aging. Fine lines appeared around her eyes, then deepened into crow's feet. Her hair, once a vibrant auburn, was now streaked with silver. The background of the portrait grew darker, the light in her eyes dimming. But while the portrait withered, Clara remained untouched by time. She would stare at her own reflection in the hallway mirror, her face as young and unchanged as the day she arrived. She felt no older, but a profound weakness had taken root within her. It was a deep gnawing exhaustion, a slow draining of her life force, as if something vital was being siphoned away. Night after night, she was a flower, frozen in full bloom, while her painted twin wilted in her place. One rainy afternoon, while desperately searching for answers in the attic's gloom, her fingers brushed against a loose floorboard beneath an old sea trunk. Prying it open, she discovered a small, leather-bound journal hidden within. It was her great aunt's. The spidery handwriting filled the pages with a chilling tale. It spoke of a family curse, a pact made with shadow. It described a portrait, enchanted to absorb time itself. The eldest daughter of each generation, the journal explained, would be granted a life of unnatural youth. Their aging process halted, as long as the painting continued to grow old in their stead. Clara's blood ran cold as she turned to the final, tear-stained page. The ink was frantic, desperate. "It has grown too old," her aunt had written. "The magic is fading. It will need a new face soon." A sudden, violent gust of wind slammed the attic window shut, extinguishing her candle and plunging her into darkness. And in that suffocating silence, a whisper, clear as ice, slithered into her ear. "You're next." Panic seized her. She scrambled for the matches, her fingers fumbling, and relit the candle. She ran to the portrait, holding the flickering flame high. The face staring back at her was now ancient, a shrunken skeletal visage with sunken cheeks and hollow sightless eyes. The paint was cracked and faded, the canvas itself seeming to decay. But as Clara leaned closer, her heart hammering against her ribs, she saw something else. In the dark, reflective glass of the frame, her own face stared back. And as she watched in horror, her reflection began to shimmer, her skin turning translucent, her form starting to fade into the painted darkness behind her. Weeks later, the authorities were finally called. They found the house empty, coated in a thick layer of dust, as if it had been abandoned for decades. There was no trace of Clara. She had simply vanished. They searched every room, every dark corner, but the only thing they found was in the attic. Hanging in the center of the room was a portrait, the oils still smelling faintly fresh. It depicted a beautiful young woman, her auburn hair gleaming, her green eyes wide with a silent, unspeakable terror. As the investigators turned to leave, the camera pans over the new painting. For a single, imperceptible moment, the eyes of the woman in the portrait flicker. From the canvas, a final, faint whisper escapes, curling into the stale air. "Now it's your turn." Every face tells a story. Some never end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tales from the shadows.